Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifey Technologies YouTube channel, and thank you for watching and supporting our channel. So we are continuing with our Nokia Lab simulations, and in our last few episodes we've been discussing how to implement OSPF on Nokia routers. So we discussed the basic configuration, the step-by-step procedure, and the troubleshooting commands of how to implement basic OSPF functionalities on Nokia routing devices. We then went ahead and discussed how to control the DR and BDR election on a broadcast network and the network types, the interface, the point to point, the broadcast network, and the non-broadcast network that you can configure on the links that are running OSPF. In our last episode, we've discussed how to implement OSPF authentication just to ensure that we improve on the security of our network. So if you haven't watched these three videos, you can check them on our channel and they'll give you a better understanding of how to implement OSPF on Nokia routing devices. So in this episode, we are focusing on how to change or how to configure metric or cost. We know that OSPF determine the best path based on cost. So the lower the cost, the more the path will be preferred. So sometimes we end up having to make cost changes just to ensure that the traffic flow will be optimal for our network. So on these routers, if I show router OSPF neighbor, OSPF 10 neighbor, you can see that we have a peering session in area 1. If I show router OSPF 10 routes, we have the routes learned via OSPF. So this is a direct route, it has a cost of 0. And then we have, this is the loopback 0 of router 2 and it has a cost of 1. So the cost has been calculated based on the reference bandwidth. So OSPF determines cost. When you are running OSPF on your network, we have two mechanisms in which we can determine the cost. The first one is using the reference bandwidth, and the second one is by manually configuring the cost. Many times on the service provider network, we normally go with manually configuring cost so that it's very clear which path the traffic will take whenever you have multiple paths. So if we check the OSPF configuration, and so it's configure router OSPF 10 info. You can see that we don't have any cost configurations, but if we do info detail, we'll see that we have a reference bandwidth of, this is 100 million. So we have a reference bandwidth configured to be 100 million, but the only challenge with this is that any link that is above 1G will always report that the cost is 1. So that's why when we are checking the next hop for, if I show router OSPF routes, and then I need to check these, OSPF 10, you can see that the cost is set to, the cost to this hop is set to 1. And this is 100 G link, but you can see that the cost is set to 1. So one thing you can do is you can change the reference bandwidth and set it to a higher value. For example, if I want to, you can see that info detail, we have a cost of 100 million. Maybe we can change it to a higher value. So one mechanism that we can change the cost is by configuring the reference bandwidth. And many times when you are doing this, you need to do it on all the routers in the network. You don't just do it on one end and forget about the other end. So I can configure the reference bandwidth. You can see that we have all these values. The bandwidth should be in kbps, so I can configure higher value. And this is maybe 1,333, 123. This is 1 billion. Can do 100 billion info. So we have configured the reference bandwidth. So we need to do a similar configuration on R2 just so that they will use the same parameters when they are calculating the cost. So I will configure router OSPF 10 info detail given that we haven't changed, is still 100 million. So I will configure the reference bandwidth to be this value. And now if I check the cost on R1, let's see, show router route table, show router OSPF 10, OSPF 10 route table. You can see that now the cost has changed to 1000. So the way it calculates, it will take the reference bandwidth and then it divides by the bandwidth of the link. So if it's a 10G link, it will be the reference bandwidth divided by 10G, and remember it's in kbps, so you can always adjust it to the value that you want. So the cost has now changed from 1, you can see here it was 1 up there, trying to scroll up, not able to scroll up, let me try again, still not able to. But you can see that now we have a reference bandwidth of over 100. This is 100 billion. So you can see that it's very easy to change the reference bandwidth. So if you are setting it to 100 billion, you need to set it to 100 billion on all the nodes, or all the nodes that are involved in OSPF. So this is the first way you can do it. So I will remove this and just leave it to the default. So I will run no reference bandwidth, and then on R2 no reference bandwidth info, we don't have bandwidth configured. If I run the same command to show the route on this node, was on R1 has logged me out. Let me log into R1 again. So show router OSPF 10 route table 2.2.2. You can see the cost is back to 1. So now it's using the default of 100 million. Another way that we can change the cost is by manually configuring the cost. So if I go to configure router OSPF 10 info, and then we do interface to R2, we need to be under this area 1, interface to R2 info. We can use the metric command to configure the metric. So metric, and then you enter the value. You can see the value ranges from 1 to 65,535. Can configure cost of 100. I need to do the same configuration on R2. So I will do area 1 metric. Area 1, we need to be under that interface to R1 metric, we set it to 100. So now when we check the cost from R1 to R2 loopback 0, we need to have the cost set to 100. So I will run the same command again, and now you can see that the cost is set to 100. So you can easily configure the cost using the metric command, or you can configure the reference bandwidth and make it higher so that you will have different cost for different link. If you have 100G, you have 1G, you have 200G, the cost will be adjusted automatically. But many times in service provider network, we normally configure the cost manually on the links. So this is it. This is how you implement the metric in OSPF, and you know that OSPF will determine the best path based on the metric. The lower the metric, the more the paths will be preferred. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more upcoming videos. Thank you.